Hello everyone, Revan619 here. How the devil are you? Been a little while since I've posted a video because I've been very busy this month with work, but I thought I would do something that I'm getting a lot of questions for on the channel whilst I've been away, which is people asking what build they should try first. Now, I did a 1.5 video where I said that I think the best build for someone to run through as a new player was a Warrior Navy Officer. I know a lot of people are upset that this overlaps with Abelard, but all I can say is that means the video wasn't aimed at you because you're not a new player. But no, Warrior is one of the best starting archetypes in the game. It's very easy to learn, very straightforward. It's the reason why Abelard gets so overhyped, despite just being a vanilla Imperial World character. It's just Warrior is that OP. It is one of the strongest base archetypes, and it can carry any tier 2. This is what led to a lot of overhype for Vanguard, because Vanguard often gets attributed for what Warrior does. With all of this said and in mind, that little introduction over, I wanted to go through each of the origins and sort of suggest how we can look at some homeworlds, some options for how we can set them up, and then where these exist on the spreadsheet for those of you who want to follow along. So let's talk about what the homeworlds actually offer and give us. So with recent changes and looking at some more optimizations lately, this has slightly changed from how I'd actually view things when I put them together. I didn't realize how big the Fortress World nerf was, so we'll go over that. So rather than just read through every talent, we'll sort of talk about some key things and what it can offer you. Death World is the main feature, is Survival Instincts, which is basically when you would die, you don't, and you get temporary wounds instead, and as long as you have temporary wounds, you get buffs to dodge and armor. So this is very good, very straightforward. The stats that you get from this are focused more for melee, and some of the talents can be quite useful. Tenacity is one that I used to overvalue, but there is not many times where it is that useful, because enemies that use stun grenades tend to throw 3 rather than just 1, and you'll tend to get spammed, so because it's once per combat, it means that you'll survive 1 stun and then get stunned anyway. Wounded Beast is exceptional for a Blade Dancer build, so there are many builds that can use traumas, mostly Executioners, but specifically for Blade Dancer, combine this with Facing the End can make an incredibly high stat character, which allows you to trivialize even going to max sliders, which is saying everything all the way to right, so going beyond unfair. And this can, yeah, just stat-wise it trivializes the game, though you will still have some of the negatives from those traumas, and they will stop augments. The other ones, it's a bit more situational. So Brutal Hunter could be useful against enemies that have less than 50% health and bleeding, which I find is better than Trusty Weapons, because Trusty Weapons themselves is kind of limited to axes, hammers, and las weapons, but if you are using it, it is quite useful for that. So obviously Death World is a very safe starting one. Voidborn, its main ability is Fortune, so you can reroll a fail, dodge, parry, characteristic, or skill test, and you have a 20% chance of success that will happen. Now, this can go up, and there are some benefits to it, but that is sort of the main feature. But the reason everyone picks this is for Be Smart. This allows you to scale Fellowship from Intelligence. However, Intelligence is a terrible stat. It doesn't really scale with any archetypes. Even Operative barely gets any bonuses from it, and you can't really make an effective skill monkey until the end game, because there is no gear to increase intelligence, and you get a lot of free fellowship through colony rewards. So your fellowship could end up being 250, whereas your intelligence, even maximally invest, will struggle to get above 90. So it's just, they don't work out the same. But realistically, you're probably always going to be about 30 points ahead on fellowship than you will be on intelligence. Doesn't mean you can't do that, it just means it's not as good as a lot of people will lead you to believe. Bloody Mess can have some fairly good options, so just randomly getting crit. But once again, because of DLC power creep, Be Smart actually made a comeback. So there is an item for Master Tactician, so this is going to be useful for Soldier, Blade Dancer, and Officer builds, that as you build your stacks of Tactical Advantage, which is the mechanic of the Tier 2, it will scale your intelligence. So that's the one situation where Voidborn's good. For any Be Smart Master Tactician build, it's just the same shame that Operative can't get that, because then Operative will finally have an incredible build. Now, Hive World is considerably one of the weaker ones. So what it does is you can get your fellowship bonus resolve if there are 3 or more creatures, allies, enemies in 3-cell radius, and you get 2 penalties resolved when you have no allies around. The stats wise, they do fit for an officer, but a lot of the stuff just isn't very good. Camaraderie doesn't work in dialogue, so it's only in combat, so it does pretty much nothing. Outnumber, it's very rare that you even have melee superiority because of how quickly things die. Helping Hand is just getting 2 MP again, it's not that impactful. Weapon personalization would be terrible if there wasn't a bug. So realistically, I don't think that this should be limited to just physical weapons, but this can currently be used to increase rate of fire for rock swords. If you have a lad's weapon in the offhand and a physical weapon in the primary hand, it will actually apply and boost. So a primitive weapon in your main hand, like a sword, or even if you just take like a solid projection pistol like the Ripper, it will apply to offhand lad's weapons. So that's where this comes very useful. So it's very good for a Commissar build. Something like Fresh Start is I think they definitely need a pass on Homeworlds. So Forge World also got a huge nerf, which is now that its base bonus applies extra 5%. It gives you an extra stack of the penalties that you get from shock weapons. So going Forge World can get you one shot very easily. So early game, the extra armor does pretty much nothing, and it just really hurts. But scaling wise, subskin armor is very good if you're not doing turbo 1-turn instant wins, because more armor. Armor is the best defensive option in the game, far better than dodge. Locomotive systems is good to get some MP and more dodge if you are stacking that way. An analytics system is probably the worst because you always get to about 100% hit chance if you have an ally buffer. But if you're not really buffing from allies, then obviously having that intelligence bonus to crit chance is quite useful. Imperial World is probably went from one of the worst ones to one of the best ones as updates have changed things. So almost every companion is Imperial World. But what this does is it allows you to just get a +10 to somewhere. Very, very useful for early game. Never really drops off. Just having a +10 is always nice. One of the ones that is very good is Doing My Part. So if you don't have overlapping archetypes, you get -1 to cost. So if you only have 1 soldier, their first soldier ability, -1. If you only have 1 arc militant, first ability, -1. If you only have mass tactician, -1, so on and so forth. So depending on your party compositions, this can either be biz or worthless. Ready to serve is also quite useful, especially if you have officers about to, just get an extra fellowship to resolve. Stronger together, you can pass those buffs to allies, so if everyone in the party is using this, it is also very good, especially if you're not relying on officers too heavily. It's another way to get out there. Better Die for the Emperor isn't one that I really see very often because it's very rare that you take damage, but probably useful for higher difficulties. And no Heresy, if you're not using any of those law skills, then yeah, getting 10% critical hit chance and 10 armor against Xenos or demonic creatures, useful, especially because it gives half those bonus to allies, and all of Act 4 and Act 5 is pretty much Xenos. Now, Fortress World, this guy got a nerf, didn't he just? So, the way that this used to work with Never Stop Shooting is whenever you got kills or did certain actions, you'd get stacks of Never Stop Shooting, which gives you a percentage chance to have a free attack. This used to work on extra turns. Now, it only works on main turns, and you can't really use it till round 2. So round 2 on your main turn, round 3 on your main turn, but you can't get it to apply on bonus turns, and you can't get it to apply on stuff like Finest Hour, and if enemies interrupt you, there isn't a chance that you can use. I also think it might be bugged. I've done 320-hour runs since the update. I've not seen it proc once, even in scenarios where I have used 0, and I mean 0 officers, so I had no grand strategists involved either. It just never procced. I didn't see it happen once, so I don't know if they broke it, or if it's just I didn't notice. But now the only really worthwhile talent from this one is Spare Magazine. With the current state of it, I'd probably skip Fortress World. It literally went from biz for Blade Dancers and all soldier builds to just not really being the best one to go. Realistically, the 2 safest options is going to be Forge World and Death World for most, but I honestly think Imperial World for early game is just going to be the best option, which surprisingly all the companions have, unless you're doing, say, a very niche swift build like Voidborn for a Master Tactician or Hive World for a Commissar using dual pistols. You can abuse that, and the extra stacks for Resolve is pretty nice. But let's talk about Origins. I'm going to try and recommend some builds that we have here. So, the way regimental tactics work is for one round, you give your allies fellowship bonuses to damage, and you can't hurt allies. Now, it's not just that allies can't hurt allies, it also means that HP cost effects outside of Blade Dancer abilities no longer cost wounds. So if you watch the video that I did on this, you can use stuff like Bloody Pact to generate infinite AP, but it will also apply to weapons that normally have recoil damage and consume HP. It basically stops, all damage like that. So it is incredibly useful. And it means that you can freely use arc rifles without hitting allies. You can shoot around allies to not hurt them. Hell, if you had a Commissar in the party, he could even cause allies to dodge the at all costs, and that could hit enemies to try and kill them. So this one is very good, but some of the things that are very useful is obviously Field of Fire. Applies to anything with rate of fire. So every attack that your party makes, you're increasing the rate of fire by everyone. So very good for any burst builds, very good for any rock sword builds. Unflinching heroism, if you're a main damage dealer, is also very good because people stacking heroic actions means you're going to get stat increases. Suppression fire is also very good because it gives a lot of dodge reduction. Very useful for Act 3, one of my favorite ones. Fixed bayonets, unless you're using an Arc Militant, is probably the worst one. I don't really like that. But trench warfare for any lad's weapon build is just great. It applies to pistols, it applies to rifles. The two builds that I'd probably suggest for this one, if we have a look at the sheet, that's bright. But yes, the two ones that I would mainly recommend, which at the moment it is Fortress World. You could change this to Imperial World and it'd probably work out better for you. But it is going to be, and you could also drop the willpower for that one then. So, but yes, so Company Commander, which is going to be the Soldier Arc Militant. Though, personally, I actually prefer the Bounty Hunter version, which you can use the Gunslinger Commander, which essentially doesn't need to use the pistols. It can actually use rifles just fine. So this version, I like the flavor more. Yes, Arc Militant is more useful, but I like the flavor more of the Gunslinger version. So you have two las pistols and a rifle. The rifle is going to be your main ranged one, and the pistols is only going to be in close combat instead of using a shotgun, whereas the other one will use a shotgun. But yeah, the way it just progresses is very nice. You get a lot of armor pen, you get a lot of damage stack. If you've got another bounty hunter in the party, Share the Spoils is currently bugged, so you'll want to take Share the Spoils earlier. Switch Share the Spoils for Expert Finesse if you're using another bounty hunter. The reason for this is, yeah, it's bugged. You can get like 2,000+ % extra damage. It's better than Malpian Shroud in a lot of cases. So bounty hunter, if you've got two of them in the party, will be adding the same damages like you would if you were turbocharging them. The other one that I suggest is going to be the Trench Strategist one, which is an Officer Grand Strategist build. This will just enable you to always win. You go first, you buff the whole party, you give damage buffs to the whole party, and you'll just start one-turning. Probably from Act 2 and Footfall is when you can consistently one-turn with stims, and by about level 24, 25, you don't even need to use consumables, and you'll one-turn even unfair. So those two builds that I'd recommend for that. At the moment, one says Fortress World, the other one says Imperial World, but you could use Imperial World on both of them, especially if you're not overlapping archetypes. You can just take Doing My Part. Commissar is probably my favorite run when it comes to an RP perspective, especially having those high coercion checks. And Act 3, there are just some fantastic opportunities for roleplay. The way this one works is it has the strongest buff in the game, which is you shoot an ally, and if they die, your entire party gets these buffs. If they don't die, you all do more. So it increases their stats, and it also increases their damage. So both of these are really strong. And the way that you can avoid actually killing allies is Master Tactician. You can use Strong Point to give them temp health. You can use Relics Anguish with Knockback to either on mauls or shotguns give them temp health, or you can abuse the Overpowered Invigorating Resolve, which is as you build momentum, you give temporary health, so then you can buff them. The other thing is, yes, they also get extra damages to pistols, so that is very good. So if you want to have a pistol and a sword warrior, then yes, there is almost no reason that you would want to click the pistol over melee, but for RP to have that sort of iconic Commissar, it is kind of what you will want to do, because unfortunately the game doesn't support mixed arms builds very well. The only one that does it is Navy Officer, but we'll get to him in a little bit. But this one is, like I said, it's going to be one of my favorites. Very good for Hive World, very good for Imperial World as well. It used to be okay for Fortress, but with the nerfs, I don't recommend Fortress. But yeah, being able to, if you're using a dual pistol build, one for the enemies, two for the traitors is useful. If not, stuff like Let Them Know Fear is also very good for stacking resolve. Motivation is also very good for getting your movement as you're going around. And that summary execution being able to double the at all cost bonus is one of the reasons why it's so strong. It is definitely one of my favorites. So the two builds that I like the most with Commissar, like I said, the iconic Commissar, which is the warrior version, this is mostly a melee build, but it has a little bit of range support for when you can't really break cover. Very strong, very good Arc Militant build. Yeah, warrior. Any warrior build can solo the game if you use it correctly. So that one's going to be very strong. The other one, so there's the Officer Master Tactician build. This is one of my favorite builds to do on any run, and it basically, you're mainly a buffer, but you can add in a little bit of support damage. It's the only officer that can really do decent support damage. Yeah, both of them very, very strong. The two that I recommend highly for a Commissar run. They are very enjoyable. You can do soldier pistol runs. I just don't think pistols are as good. You can also do a lot of really fun things with Voidborn, because you can also use that stuff there, and even arc rifles, but you're not really building into the Commissar stuff. But yes, I would say have a look through some of them. If you want to do plasma builds, just remember plasma pistols are going to kill allies, because you ignore allies' defenses. At the moment, Crimelord and Noble are probably the two worst origins, because they're just not very strong. They didn't get updated in the 1.5 update patch. And basically what they do is you can increase your damage by perception bonus. If you move, you can increase your dodge. And the non-damaging ability part doesn't seem to work and seems to be bugged. I've not seen that part of Surefire Plan work for a very, very long time, and others have reported the same. I don't know if it's a local issue, but for some reason I've not seen that third one work. It does mostly buff weapon skill, and everyone wants to take this for an operative, so they always get like, wait, what? Which means that some of the stuff for increasing damage, like Killing Plan, that does come from weapon skill, but you can use the Cerebral Inverters from DLC 3, so the augment, that will change that to come from ballistic skill, so that will fix your fire plan, and that will keep your things up. Yeah, avoid Disorienting Plan, doesn't work. Yeah, just doesn't work. Escape Plan can be okay, but I've not really found much of use for it. Same with like Contingency Plan is good as a backup, but if you're using Killing Plan, you might not need it. And the last plan is, again, I've never really run in situations where I would die. But thematically, because you do get bonuses to perception, you can always level perception with it. It does make this build lean into quite well for either Blade Dancer or even operative snipers. So two of my favorite range builds is the Lightning Assassin, which can be stronger on an Arbitrator, but it is very, very good. Again, I've got Fortress World, but because it's not working, probably move away from Fortress World. But yeah, so you can use arc rifles to reset a lot of stuff for your litanies. So the way it works with residual charges, every source of damage will actually build up to reset to hit that 10 to give you a free attack. That will also include the direct damage procs that you get from Assassin from those attacks. So it's easier to like infinitely stack Death Whispers or reset your killing edges with this build. But the Bounty Hunter version is probably stronger, which is what I've put in the Bullseye build. It uses the Aldari weapons, which have a few infinite loops, and the endgame one, the Lullaby of Shael, the damage stack is crazy. As far as operative snipers go, strongest version of that. And whilst deadly to allies, you can use the ballistic calculator to chain shot enemies, but just keep in mind you probably will shoot allies. So if they are close, you might want that secondary shotgun, though I don't use those. I just go all in with the range. The other build that I would recommend for this one is probably going to be one of the Blade Dancer ones. So Blade Dancer, I've got the Forge Flare Overlord here, which is a Blade Dancer Arc Militum. Uses Drakari Sword, stacks agility to damage. It will be very good just to get the extra perception damage in. I don't aim to, with this build, to go for traumas, because obviously then you can't use the perception-based abilities. You could do that, but at that point you might as well not play a Crimelord. Priest is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest origin in the game at the moment because of the way some of its talents work. So this one boosts Law Imperium and Willpower, and the War Hymn just uses this unique Zeal mechanic that it has to do some crazy stuff. So Zeal, basically you get extra bonuses based on how much Zeal you have to do some things. Now, That sounds very vague, but it's hard to explain what it does without explaining the other parts. So the two part of this is some of your physical stats will become willpower, which makes this a lot more easier. And you, at the start of combat, you get willpower bonus stacks of zeals, and then you also get 1 stack of zeal for each enemy they attack with a bolter, flamer, chain weapon, so chainsaw, chain axes, melter, or power weapons for the first time in combat, and you get +2 for every daemon or xenos you get killed in combat by any source, so you or allies. Then what you do with this is once per combat you get to use War Hymn, and when you use this, it grants 2 times number of zeal stacks momentum. Then Ministorum Priest gains willpower bonus stacks of zeal. What it also does is it will proc Litany of Hatred. So whenever the Ministorum Priest uses War Hymn or Furious Recital for 1 round, the priests themselves and their allies within a 5-cell radius deal 5 times number of zeal stacks percentage more weapon damage. This bonus is doubled against Daemons, Psykers, and Xenos. This is exceptionally powerful. If you've seen any YouTuber build, they always stack like 3 sources of this to artificially pump up their numbers. And it's how you'll turn like a 200 damage hit to like a 3 to 5 to 10k damage hit. And unless you know what to look for in the logs, you can get very bamboozled by some of the things that you'll see presented. But there are ways to multi-stack this. So Argenta's has the 1-star power armor. So when she uses heroic action, she'll recast this. So she'll get 2 stacks there. And there's also a knife that you can use to get a 3rd one, but also just using more priests. So multiple priests can stack all their different sources of this, and it will last the whole turn to be used by them and allies. It is exceptionally powerful. Priest also leads very well into doing a Flamer Bolter build, specifically the Bolter, because you can turn that willpower into more damage. So as you get buffs as well, it will scale that into direct damage. It's why the heavy Bolter build is probably the strongest one in the game. And you can use this for a Blade Dancer Executioner build because Flensing Faith will allow you to have more burn dots. With the changes to many enemies being immune to bleed and toxin in Act 4 and Act 5, this is probably the strongest Blade Dancer Executioner build that you have, because yeah, it's the only one that's even really doing damage. So the builds I'd recommend for this is going to be my Arc Cardinal build, which is the Trauma build Blade Dancer Executioner. That is, of course, using the really OP stuff from Flensing Faith and Priest. So yeah, for that 1 turn Litany of Hatred, you'll do exceptional damage, and you'll probably clear most combats solo because of it. You only really need 1 Officer Grand Strategist buffs to solo most difficulty encounters, and the rest of the party just get to watch on from the background. The other one I really like is very similar to the Astra Militarum Commander, which is going to be a regular bolter bounty hunter build. So you use shotguns and use regular bolters. And this one, again, Fortress World, so you could probably move away from that. But yes, you use this to do exceptionally high damage. You remove enemies' armor by building up height and concentration. Hunt and Surge will build us up damage, as will Share the Spoils, which is, like I said, you want to get Share the Spoils in earlier if you're using a second bounty hunter. I'm not in this scenario, which is why I don't have it in there. But yes, this is going to be very strong. You can also use the Archbishop build, which is, this one is using the OP arc rifle thing. There was a whole build on Reddit and a post done by another chap called White Wing, who absolutely loves this build. I obviously did the Starchild build, and the Priest is a slightly toned down version of that. So this is the less OP version of that. So it's the second strongest build in the game, with the Starchild being the strongest. But yeah, those are the builds that I would say definitely look at. But if you really want to just be doing the crazy damage, the Argenta at home, this is the Heavy Gunner build, uses the Artificer Power Armors to do 1 AP burst fires. Exceptionally powerful. Again, Fortress World, so probably best to change to Imperial World, and you can just build Argenta as a small arms bounty hunter or a master tactician. I think bounty hunter is stronger than master tactician on a soldier, but that's not a debate I'm looking to start right now. But if you guys want to do that in the comments, then you go right ahead. Navy Officer, yeah, basically when you crit, you get a free offhand attack. This is designed for using dual melee, and it is exceptionally powerful, but because of how little support that we have for mixed arm builds, and the community, it hungers, it craves, it yearns for mixed arm builds, this is the one to do it. It's the only one that can do it. So whilst the offhand pistol damage will not really get boosted by anything, at least you're using it, and that's all we really want. So the gimmick around this one is, of course, Brace for Impact. So this will give allies extra, well, deflection, which is probably the worst defensive mechanic in the game because of just how poor that is. But I've done a whole Reddit post and that is linked in the spreadsheet to that Reddit post to explain how defensive mechanics work. But basically, your own armor reduces the effectiveness of deflection, but it's still nice to have, especially if your allies don't have much armor. This will do a lot more for them. You can actually always raise perception, which is incredibly useful for any of your builds to be able to level up perception. It's one of the best stats in the game. But things like get off me, yeah, your melee attacks can cause enemies to be knocked prone, which is exceptionally powerful. Get into cover can give allies extra turns, which will, if they are operative, apply exploits. Centurion voice, or Stentorian voice, will lower enemies' weapon skill and bliss skill, making it easier for you to land hits and crit in melee. Evasive maneuvers is also another good one. So whilst the allies are affected by Navy officer or non-attacking type abilities, they get extra dodge for 1 round, which is also very good. But yeah, it's all about fleet combat training. Critical hits or successful parries with an attack with their primary melee weapon immediately make an attack whichever costs least AP with their secondary weapon against the same enemy. So if you have a shotgun pistol, that will do that. If you have a burst-only pistol, it will apply a burst, or it will take a single shot. And you can use this with the focal emitters, so the eye lasers. So you can use it with the soldier one or the single shot one to hit up for all of them. So the ones that I highly recommend is the pure melee power armor version, which is the Imperial Navy Officer Breacher. This is probably the tankiest build in the game outside of Psykers, and it is incredibly powerful. You could actually stack more defensive talents in the early game, but even on unfair, I felt like you don't need to. But if you really wanted to get defensive stance early, you'll get extra toughness. This one I've got as Death World, but you could also do it Forge World for subskin armor. It's one of the few times where Imperial World isn't the one I'd recommend. But the other really strong ones is, I have a couple of good ones, but the ones people really like is the Gun Dancer. So this is the one where you can use offhand melee attacks with Blade Dancer. The damage scaling is very slow on this one. It is quite item reliant. So I actually prefer the Lord Admiral. At the moment it's Fortress World, but again, we want to move away from that. The reason why Fortress World is so good is crowd kill and easy target will actually apply to the shotgun pistol. So you can stack quite a bit of damage. So for each enemy inside the AoE, your crowd kill will do more damage. So you can use this with shotgun pistol or a hand flamer, but these are going to be the two that I really like with that one. Again, it's Fortress World, but now there's no point using Fortress World the way they changed it. So I've got to, probably the next DLC update or the next like huge quality of life update, I'll have to redo all of these builds again and then rework out the best homeworlds for them. I do honestly hope Alcat do a pass on Homeworlds, because right now, yeah, I think that's probably one of the weakest areas of character creation. Not that the game's that hard, because obviously the enemies can't deal with infinite buff stacks that we players have access to. Again, that's an entirely different conversation, so I'll save that rather than continue rambling. Noble, fantastic outfit, but hot trash. Yeah. It's just not very good. So what this can do is this origin can give +5 to an ally's characteristics. If you make them a servant, then buff them. And anytime the servant and the target of the noble deal damage to, the servant gains 10 plus noble's fellowship bonus critical hit chance against the target. It's not very good. It increases intelligence and fellowship, so most people like to make like a be smart build or something with this one, or even this is probably because of how weak the origin talents are. This is probably the best one to make a skill monkey, where you take base skill and advanced skill options, because it's not like you're wasting it, because there wasn't anything else better to take for him. But the other things is like, if the noble uses an ability on servant, the servant gains +1 AP on the next turn, so it needs to be main turn, so it's quite slow to actually get that in. You go on's the same. The servant gets +2 movement points, but 2 movement points aren't much good. If your servant's about to die, you can get another one. You protect me is if the noble and servant are adjacent to each other at the start of the noble's turn, they both get temporary wounds. But chances are, if you're playing an officer, you're going to have very low initiative. So it's very hard to set this stuff up. And you kill it if the servant kills the target that the noble dealt damage to last turn. The noble gains 1 AP next turn. But that means you need to attack before your servant, and it creates a really fickle way to do it, where it's not very good. Unless you're playing Grand Strategist, it's very hard to take advantage of it. Overseer with the service goal can allow you to apply this to the whole party, but why not just play a priest and apply a better AoE buff to a party? It's just, yeah, Noble and Crimelord are by far the worst two origins at the moment. Even when it comes to builds, they're not very impressive because they don't really do anything. So I made a Be Smart Voidborn Noble Grand Strategist for people who want to go into that. And I've taken all the advanced skills so we can try to make it a skill monkey, though you won't keep up with Jay. But in the end game, you do get some items that do give you some nice boosts. And I've also done a AoE Servo Skull version. So if you want to play an officer that puts that to the whole party, you can. But there isn't a third build because Noble adds so little, so it's just two different officer builds for there. Unfortunately, it's one of those ones where it's like, Owlcat, please buff. Sanctioned Psyker is the most diverse origin in the game and the most OP one. Loads of people expect this to be a wizard, and it's not a wizard. People want to make pure staff builds, but it's been nerfed so many times that you can't really get pure staff builds. Originally, they worked as ranged options, so a soldier could use something like muzzle velocity and rapid fire to make the staffs do turbo damage, like the pyromancy staff, but it got nerfed, so it became a weapon skill-based weapon. So then you could get extra crit chance and use weapon skills to do that. But then people complained that you were using melee stats and stacking strength to the damage of your Psyker spells through the staff, so they nerfed that again, but they didn't then give it other scaling. However, Psyker staffs can still use melee abilities. Some talents that are universal damage will apply, but say you want to use Reckless Strike, you can guarantee and up your damage there. There are many schools to Psyker, but they're so useful. Divination can increase mental stats and give some extra turns. Biomancy can give extra turns, and also it can boost physical stats. This one actually gives a true extra turn. Divination increases your turn order, so you can bring a second turn into the same combat. Telepathy has some good mental stat damage, but it's not very useful in the end game because most enemies resist it. Pyromancy is the strongest for both ranged and melee damage when it comes to it, because you can channel your dot damage that your ranged ability can do into your melee. So it is quite a nice damage boost. It will offer more than, say, Psychopaster if you want to focus on 4 swords will do. But it's obviously you got a little bit of sap. You have to sacrifice an attack action for it. And Santic Powers, whilst it seems fairly slow at the start because all it does is stack resolves, the defensive ability can make you unkillable. The attack ability can give you huge damage, and the passives are really, really strong for this one. So there's a lot of really good builds, and I'm actually known most for doing pyromancy builds. So yeah, I absolutely love Sanctioned Psyker. The build that I've probably made the most famous is obviously the Trauma build, a Death World build that I did. So I used this one to set myself on fire. I then stacked loads of dots to it with stuff like Inflame, and then we just do exceptional damage to the whole map. Yeah, very, 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 very strong. I've used this build in patch 1.4 to solo the game. Can probably still do it again, but I'd want to start Sanctic to get Destined and then pick up Pyromancy a little bit later. But you can build Biomancy to get extra dots, and it is very strong. If you want to do a more range damage focused build, because people like that whole idea of using a staff, the one I would suggest is called Spells and Shells. Originally, this was my build based on Lena the Slayer, but a few things changed a couple of times, so I had to rework the build. But this one uses Lads Rifles in one slot, and it uses the Psych Staff in the secondary. Now, the Psycho Staff will find it harder to crit now, but you could take Blazing Inferno to build that up. Funny enough, again, I took Fortress World, but now that Fortress World has been nerfed, it's probably better to go Imperial World and then drop Never Stop Believing here and get Blazing Inferno, so that way your Pyromancy staff attacks can crit better. Like I said, there's a lot of builds that, since I've realized just the extra free attack isn't working, I now need to go back and rework. But yeah, those are my two favorite pyromancy builds. There are lots more. I've got other ones around, say, a Sanctified Staff buffer build, and the strongest build in the game is actually my Star Child arc rifle build that uses the Sanctified Staff. I've got a whole video on that, so I won't go too much into that, but do look at my build playlist, which you'll see linked below if you want to go into that sort of stuff. And again, this spreadsheet is linked in every video and it's free for you to use. If you want to join memberships, you can get build codes with the auto build mod. So that way you just level up by yourself. Don't even need to make any decisions. I've also got, obviously, suggestions for gear and for augments. You don't have to follow this one for one. It's just to point you in the direction. Because I change gear so much and change build so much, it's almost impossible for me to advise one-for-one gear. Because, yeah, because you've got so many options to use. The last one is Arbitrator. So this is a DLC one. It is mostly focused around shields and shotguns, but also power mauls. One of my favorite ones. It used to feel a lot stronger, and I used to refer to it as the second strongest non-Psyker origin, but with the 1.5 update, I feel like it's been outscaled by Priest and Navy Officer. But they're still very good things. You can get extra armor penetration that comes through perception. You do extra damage during extra turns. You can get melee parry from ranged, which is very good. So you can use your ballistic skill to parry that. You can use one-handed shotguns, so you can dual wield shotguns, though dual weapon combat can be bugged for it, but you can also use a shield with a shotgun. And if you want to use a maul, you can get the bonuses that would normally apply to chainswords on the mauls to get extra parry, and you can lower enemy stats and get more critical damage. There's even stuff to get like free grenades. There's the ability to start next to enemies. There's the ability that you can get bonuses when you throw axe. And just like even giving your coercion to allies damage, it's just fantastic. And it will give you access to the unique Cybermastiff, which is probably the best pet. Pets aren't the best because they don't get weapon scaling, because you can't increase their weapons. But the dog is really fun, and it can get a lot of bonuses that can apply to it. But save that for an Arbitrator video. But those are sort of all the ideas. I know this video is a bit long, but I will try to get some timestamps below. And I hope this is going to help you go through and pick. I just realized I didn't actually show off some Arbitrator builds. So my favorite ones in this one is the Arbitrator's Heavy Gunner, which it uses stubbers. I really like the heavy gun, so I like using the heavy gun and a shotgun. You can also set this up to use it with a shield, and again, we're going to probably want to change this to Imperial World, but that means that we can get shield mastery much earlier in here, so it does free up a lot of talents. Paw Patrol, if you want to do a melee and dog build, kind of if you come from Darktide, this one is very strong because of that joint hunting perk. I do have links to the wiki that explains what each of these talents do, so if you want to read them, then you can check that there. That one is exceptionally powerful. The other one I really like is the Taxman, which of course, shield shotgun and Lad's Rifle Bounty Hunter. Like one of my favorite builds. It's just a lot more strong. It's a straight upgrade to Solomon. Unfortunately, because Overseer and the pets don't scale with your build, they're quite weak in Rogue Trader compared to someone who's come from Wrath of the Righteous who thinks pets are going to be OP. They don't work the same here. But it is still really good. And these builds are really fun. I also have melee builds in here as well, quite a few of them, and even some arc rifle builds like I did in the Assassin one. This one would be a straight upgrade to the one that I did for Crimelord earlier, but those are going to be sort of an overview of the builds, and I do have a lot more. Obviously, I've got all the companions on here and many options, and for those of you who do follow all my videos, you might notice a new build on here, which is a Sniper Iterative build using the Ricochet Sniper with a secondary staff. Been testing through this one. Yeah, a lot of fun. It lowers the risk of Herrick just exploding and dying, but yeah, still very usable. But that's all I've got time for today. I hope you found this useful. If you have, do like and subscribe. If you do want to support the channel, memberships is the best way to do it, and it will give you special roles on the Discord server and a lot of early access to builds, videos, and other things that I'm working on, especially when it comes to Dark Heresy, because Dark Heresy is something that is mostly being supported in the members area, whereas obviously the channel is based for Rogue Trader, so the YouTube stuff will focus more on that. I am looking to expand some other games, so we might see some stuff coming up soon around Zero Company, Total War, and some other Warhammer projects that I don't want to talk about just yet. But thanks all, and I'll see you in the next video.